I woke to a morning that should have been ordinary, sunlight slicing through the blinds in slats of warmth. But the house felt wrong. It was a quiet wrongness, an absence I couldn't name. "Sam," I called, sitting up in bed. My voice echoed too loudly in the stillness. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee, a comforting normalcy. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, feet brushing the cold wood floor, and padded toward the kitchen. My heart expected to see Sam there, humming along to their favorite playlist, a mug cradled in their hands. But the kitchen was empty, and the coffee maker was off. "Sam." My voice cracked this time. The knot of unease tightened. Their jacket wasn't hanging on the hook by the door. Their keys weren't in the dish. I grabbed my phone, dialing with shaking fingers. The call went straight to voicemail. A growing sense of dread curled in my stomach. I searched the house, each empty room magnifying the hollowness inside me. The bed was still rumpled from their side, but when I checked the bathroom, the toothbrush holder only had one. My knees nearly buckled. Sam's photos, usually framed on the shelves in the living room, were gone. Not replaced, not broken, just gone. It wasn't just the photos. It was their books, their shoes, their signature perfume that used to linger in the hallway. All gone. Every trace of them wiped clean, leaving only the mocking shell of a shared life. I ran out the door, barely registering my socked feet slapping against the pavement as I bolted to the neighbor's house. Mrs. Ellis, sweet but nosy, would have noticed if Sam left. She always noticed everything. When she opened the door, her face crinkled in confusion. "Who?" "Sam," I said, breathless. "You know Sam. My partner. You've met them dozens of times." Mrs. Ellis blinked, her wrinkled hands clutching her cardigan. I'm sorry, dear. I don't know who you're talking about." The bottom dropped out of my world. I stumbled back, cold dread spreading through my chest. I tried the hospital, the police, anyone who might have a record of Sam. But every inquiry hit a wall of confusion. Their name wasn't listed anywhere, their image didn't exist, and even their voicemail no longer played their voice. Back home, I sank onto the couch, hands clutching my temples. A growing sense of unreality clawed at me. How could an entire person just disappear? Not just physically, but erased as though they'd never existed at all. The house groaned softly, the sounds of it settling, filling the oppressive silence. My gaze fell on the bookshelf, now oddly sparse without Sam's dog-eared novels. My eyes snagged on something unfamiliar, a slim leather-bound journal wedged at an angle between two cookbooks. I didn't remember putting it there. My hand trembled as I pulled it free. The cover was plain, but the edges of the pages shimmered faintly, like old parchment illuminated by candlelight. Flipping it open, I froze. Inside was Sam's handwriting, their looping cursive unmistakable. "To whoever finds this, if you're reading, it means I'm gone. Not dead, gone. You'll need to look beyond what's real to find me. The answers are out there, in places people forget to see. Follow the bookstore on Ash Lane. Trust no one else. Please don't give up on me." Ash Lane was a street I'd only passed in the periphery, its faded sign barely visible under years of grime. I never had a reason to go there, but now, with the journal clutched tightly in my hands, it felt like the only tether to sanity. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed to swallow sound. The buildings here were old, their windows smeared with dust. The bookstore was easy to spot, its sign reading Echoes and Pages in curling gold letters. The display window held no bestseller paperbacks, just antique volumes stacked unevenly like forgotten relics. The bell above the door tinkled as I stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of aged paper and something faintly metallic. Shelves towered over me, crammed with books whose spines bore no titles, their covers too worn to distinguish. Looking for something specific? The voice startled me. A man emerged from behind a counter that seemed sculpted from shadow and dust. His face was thin, his smile brittle. "I'm not sure," I said, pulling out the journal. "I'm looking for someone who might have left this for me." His eyes flicked to the journal, and for the briefest moment, his expression darkened. "Interesting piece you've got there. What makes you think I can help?" "Because they told me to come here," I said, voice firmer than I felt. "Do you know Sam?" The man's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I know many Sams. Perhaps I know yours. But finding them won't be easy or free." "What does that mean?" I demanded. He gestured for me to follow, leading me to a back room. The shelves here were emptier, the air colder. On a small table sat a single book, its pages rippling faintly, as if stirred by an unseen breeze. He tapped the cover. "This will tell you where they've gone. But be warned, it may reveal more than you're prepared to see. And the price." "What price?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Every disappearance has a cost. Yours may be more than you're willing to pay." As I reached for the book, the shadows around me seemed to ripple. Something about this place, this moment, felt alive. The dread clawing at my chest was almost unbearable. But Sam's name, their face, their memory, drove me forward. I opened the book, and the room began to change. The book's pages seemed endless, the paper soft and thin, like they might dissolve under my fingertips. Each one was blank, yet something flickered just beyond my vision. Shapes, words, half-formed images that danced on the edge of recognition. As I turned the pages, the room around me shifted. Shadows crept from the corners, elongating and stretching, swallowing the warm lamplight until I was cocooned in dimness. And then the book began to hum, a low, resonant sound, barely audible but pulsing through my chest like a second heartbeat. The page beneath my hands started to glow, faint lines etching themselves onto the surface, forming a map. It wasn't a map of anything familiar. There were no roads or landmarks. Instead, it depicted twisting paths and strange symbols, like the diagrams in some ancient tome. The shopkeeper's voice cut through the darkness. "This is the corridor. It's a place between. If your partner's debt was taken, it's likely they've been claimed there." "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer directly. "If you follow the map, you'll find the gate. But remember, the corridor is not a place for the living. Its rules are not ours, and its inhabitants. They will know you don't belong." Before I could ask more, the map's glow intensified, swallowing the shop in blinding light. I stumbled backward, shielding my eyes, and when I lowered my hand, the world had changed. The air was heavy, suffused with a metallic tang, and a pale mist clung to the ground like creeping ivy. Shapes loomed in the distance, tall, indistinct structures that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. I clutched the book to my chest as I began to walk, the map now etched in my memory. The corridor was silent, but not peacefully so. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your ears, making every step, every breath sound too loud. The twisting paths on the map led me through archways made of bone-white stone, their surfaces carved with symbols that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. Then came the whispers. Soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but growing louder as I walked. Words I couldn't understand, layered and overlapping, filling the air around me. I turned, but there was no one there, just the endless mist and the strange towering structures that loomed like sentinels. "Sam?" I called, my voice swallowed by the fog. The whispers stopped. The silence that followed was worse, heavy and watchful. And then, from somewhere ahead, came the sound of footsteps. Not mine. They were uneven, dragging, like someone, or something, was moving toward me. I froze. The air grew colder, and my breath clouded in front of me. From the mist emerged a figure, its shape indistinct, its movements unnervingly jerky. It wore no face, just a shifting void where one should be. And yet, it seemed to focus on me, its head tilting as if in recognition. I stepped back, but the thing didn't follow. Instead, it raised one hand, long, too long, and pointed to a distant light, faint but unwavering in the distance. A gate. The figure dissolved into the mist, leaving me alone. My heart thundered as I forced myself to walk toward the light, the whispers returning, louder now, as if the corridor itself was urging me forward or warning me away. When I reached the gate, I understood why. The gate was vast, its frame an intricate web of twisting metal and pale vines that pulsed faintly, like veins filled with moonlight. Beyond it was darkness, but not an ordinary darkness. It shimmered, alive and fluid, as though the gate held back something far more than absence. Etched into the gate's surface were more symbols, and as I stared at them, I realized I could almost understand them. They weren't words, they were feelings, memories, echoes of lives spent and lost. The book in my hands began to hum again, the sound rising in pitch. Its pages flapped open to a single sentence, scrawled in handwriting I didn't recognize, but somehow knew belonged to Sam. To enter, you must offer what you cannot afford to lose. What does that mean? I whispered, though no one was there to answer. The gate pulsed, as if alive. I stepped closer, and the book grew heavier in my hands. The air around me grew thicker, pressing against my skin like invisible hands. The corridor seemed to hold its breath, the whispers fading to a low murmur. I closed my eyes and held the book out. "Take it," I said, though I wasn't sure who or what I was speaking to. "Just let me in." The gate responded. The symbols on its surface began to glow, their light spilling onto the mist-shrouded ground. The book was wrenched from my hands, vanishing into the light. And then the gate opened. The darkness beyond was overwhelming, a void that pulled at me with an almost magnetic force. My heart pounded as I stepped through, the corridor falling away behind me. The world on the other side was both familiar and alien, a shifting landscape of memories and shadows. I saw fragments of my life with Sam, our first apartment, lazy mornings, whispered promises. But they were wrong, distorted, as though viewed through fractured glass. And then I saw them. Sam stood in the distance, their form flickering like a mirage. They turned, their eyes locking with mine, and for a moment, everything felt right. But the moment passed, and I realized they weren't alone. Figures surrounded them, tall, cloaked shapes with faces that glowed faintly like molten gold. They weren't holding Sam, but their presence was oppressive, a silent warning. One stepped forward, its voice a resonant echo. "This soul has a debt unpaid," it said. "You cannot claim them without cost." "What cost?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure tilted its head, considering. "To remember is to lose yourself. Choose wisely." I took a step forward, the weight of my choice pressing down like the world itself. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing. I couldn't leave Sam behind. Not again. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. To remember is to lose yourself. The golden figure waited, its faceless gaze fixed on me, and behind it, Sam's form shimmered with a desperate fragility. They looked at me, pleading silently, their lips moving without sound. "What happens if I choose?" I asked, my voice breaking. The air around me felt alive, pressing against my skin like cold, invisible tendrils. "You will take their place in the debt," the figure said, its voice a resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. What was owed will bind to you, and you will walk where shadows tread. And if I don't? My throat was dry, the words barely audible. The figure shifted, the golden glow of its face dimming slightly. Then they remain here, forgotten by the living, and your soul will remain untainted. A choice that wasn't a choice at all. I felt the weight of the corridor's oppressive silence, the low murmur of whispers circling me like a tide. My gaze fixed on Sam, their form flickering as though the world was trying to erase them entirely. "I won't leave you," I whispered, stepping forward. "I won't." The golden figure tilted its head, the faint glow pulsing in what almost felt like approval. "Then kneel and speak the truth of your bond." I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then dropped to my knees. The ground was icy, the cold sinking into my bones. The figure's presence loomed closer, and behind it, the other cloaked shapes began to hum, their voices weaving together in an unearthly harmony. "What binds you to this soul?" the figure asked, its voice quieter now, almost gentle. "Love," I said, the word trembling on my lips. "We promised each other forever. I can't leave them here." The figure reached out, a hand of light and shadow, and placed it gently on my head. The touch was neither warm nor cold, but it seemed to seep into my mind, pulling at memories I wasn't ready to lose. "Your bond will sustain them," it said, "but it will unravel you." Before I could react, the world began to shift. The humming grew louder, resonating in my chest like the toll of a great bell. The shadows around me stretched and twisted, bleeding into the light until the corridor itself was swallowed in darkness. My memories unraveled. I saw flashes of my life with Sam, our first kiss under a street lamp in the rain, the warmth of their laughter on a cold morning, the way their hand fit perfectly in mine. But as I clung to these fragments, they began to slip away, melting into the shadow like ink in water. I tried to hold on, but the harder I fought, the more they faded. The whispers grew louder, forming a single deafening word. "Let go." A terrible emptiness settled in my chest. I didn't know what I was losing anymore. Faces, names, moments, all dissolving into the void. Yet somewhere in the swirling chaos, I felt Sam's presence, a tether pulling me back. Their hand gripped mine, warm and solid, anchoring me as the world around us began to quiet. When the darkness lifted, I was kneeling on the cold floor of the bookstore. The shopkeeper stood before me, his expression unreadable. Sam was beside me, their hands still clutching mine, their face streaked with silent tears. "You paid the price," the shopkeeper said softly, almost regretfully. "And now, you must bear it." "What does that mean?" Sam asked, their voice hoarse. The shopkeeper didn't answer. He simply gestured to a mirror on the far wall. I turned, dread pooling in my stomach, and caught my reflection. I looked the same, and yet not. My eyes were darker, shadowed, as though the corridor had left its mark on me. Behind my reflection, faint shapes moved, shadows that shouldn't have been there. Sam touched my arm, grounding me. "You saved me," they said, their voice trembling. "That's all that matters." The shopkeeper's brittle smile returned. "The corridor never truly lets go. You may leave now, but its whispers will follow. And one day..." He trailed off, his gaze shifting to the book on the counter. I didn't need to hear the rest. I understood. The debt was mine now, woven into my very soul. As we stepped outside into the pale morning light, the world felt different, muted, like a shadow of what it had been. Sam squeezed my hand, their warmth chasing away the lingering cold. I didn't tell them about the whispers I could still hear, faint but insistent, calling me back. For now, we had each other. But deep in my heart, I knew the story wasn't over. The corridor had taken part of me, and one day it would come to collect the rest. We walked away together into the fragile light of dawn, carrying the weight of shadows that would never truly fade.